Okay, so we're diving into a story that really, I mean, it captured the internet's attention in 2024.
Yeah.
This woman living inside a supermarket sign for a whole year. We've got articles, local news reports, even like threads of people trying to unpack this online.
Really?
I,
Great.
our mission today is to try and figure out how this happened, like
That's,
what her life was like up there,
yeah.
and like why this story, like why did it resonate with so many people around the world?
I think it's because it's one of those stories that's so bizarre.
Right?
It can actually reveal a lot about the challenges people face and choices they make when traditional systems kind of fail them.
Exactly. So it all started in Midland, Michigan, at a family fare supermarket.
Mhm.
So I want you to picture this. You got contractors, they're up on the roof doing routine work, right?
Hmm.
They spot an extension cord just snaking its way into this giant sign.
Right.
Curiosity gets the better of them.
Of course.
They find this hidden door, almost like something out of a spy movie.
Yeah.
And they open it. And there she is, a 34-year-old woman living in this space.
Living in this crazy, unexpected space. And not just like roughing it, she had a whole setup going on.
Yeah, the contractor who found her said he nearly had a heart attack.
Oh, wow.
It's not every day you find someone living inside a sign, right?
No, you don't.
And what's even crazier is she wasn't an employee there. She had a job elsewhere in town and somehow managed to like come and go for a whole year without anyone noticing.
Talk about flying under the radar.
It really makes you think about all those people we just don't see, even in like a supposedly close-knit community.
Yeah, it speaks to like this invisibility that so many people experience, even in, like you were saying, close-knit places. The other thing that strikes me is that she had a job, but she still felt compelled to live this way.
Yeah.
So it really, it says something about the state of affordable housing,
Oh, absolutely.
even in places like Midland.
And she got this nickname online, the Roof Ninja,
Oh, really?
which I kind of love. It's very fitting. The articles describe her as incredibly resourceful and totally unfazed by the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently when they asked her about Michigan winters, she was just like, I know how to deal with that. I've been in Alaska.
Wow. This woman clearly knew how to like adapt and survive in unconventional situations.
Right.
It's both impressive and at the same time it makes you think, like,
Yeah.
why was this her best option?
Okay, so we know she was resourceful, but let's talk about the sign home itself.
Yeah.
Because this is where it gets even weirder. Multiple sources describe this space as like surprisingly comfortable.
Really?
She had flooring, a mini desk, a computer, a printer, even a coffee maker.
What?
Plus a pantry full of food and a houseplant.
So it wasn't just about survival for her. It was about like creating a space where she could actually function.
Totally.
And maybe even thrive. And think about it. The sign itself was only like 5 feet wide, 8 feet high.
Yeah.
How do you manage water waste ventilation in a space that small? It must have taken an incredible amount of resourcefulness and planning.
It's so easy to get caught up in just how weird the whole thing is.
Totally.
But you can't deny her ingenuity. It really makes you think, what skills and knowledge do we all possess
Yeah.
that we might never tap into unless we were faced with some like crazy circumstance?
That's such a good point. This story, it kind of pushes us to consider the hidden potential
Yes,
within ourselves and others, that ability to adapt and innovate when we're faced with these challenges that seem impossible to overcome.
absolutely. So we've established that she was resourceful, but the question is why the sign? Why? Like this is where it gets really, really interesting because she told police that the roof was like an old safe spot
Oh,
her family knew about. But then that just raises more questions. If it was a known safe place, why not just stay with family? The police even offered her info on homeless services and she refused.
This suggests maybe she was intentionally avoiding traditional support systems.
Yeah.
Maybe she had negative experiences in the past or just wanted to be completely autonomous. Or even, maybe distrusted those systems. I think it's a good reminder that everyone's situation is complex.
I agree.
And there's always more beneath the surface than we realize.
And we can't forget she was working. This wasn't like someone who was just choosing to live off the grid.
Oh.
It points to this larger issue that even with a job, she felt like living in a sign was better than whatever other options were available.
This brings us to like the big issue, right? Affordable housing.
Yes.
It's a growing problem, not just in cities, but everywhere, in towns.
Yeah.
Midland's economy is fairly diverse, but even there, it seems like the cost of living has just outpaced wages,
Yeah.
leaving a lot of folks struggling to find decent, affordable housing.
It really challenges our assumptions about like what does it mean to be struggling or homeless. This woman wasn't sleeping on the streets, but Her situation was precarious, to say the least.
For sure.
It forces us to expand our understanding of these issues and recognize the different forms they can take,
Absolutely.
you know?
Yeah. And this is where I think the story gets even deeper. It's not just about the practicalities of living in a sign, it's about the psychological impact of making that choice. The isolation, the constant need for secrecy, the potential health risks. It all points to a level of desperation and resilience that's remarkable and also really concerning.
It really makes you wonder about what were the turning points that led her to make this decision?
Hmm.
Was it like a sudden job loss,
Yeah.
an eviction, a family breakdown?
Hmm.
Or was it just this gradual erosion of options, this realization that the traditional path to stability just wasn't there for her?
Yeah, and that's a question we can't really answer definitively, but the story itself sparked a lot of discussion online. Some people were theorizing that she was dealing with mental health challenges, which, can make it even harder to navigate those traditional support systems.
Right.
And then others wondered if she had experienced some kind of trauma or abuse that led her to seek isolation as a form of self-protection.
Yeah. And it's important to remember, we don't know her full story. But the fact that this happened in a place like Midland, which often prides itself on this strong community family values, it really challenges that perception. It suggests that even in those seemingly idyllic settings, there are people falling through the cracks, struggling in silence, seeking these unconventional solutions to their problems.
Absolutely. And I think that's why this story resonated with so many people around the world. It tapped into this unease that a lot of us feel, this sense that the systems we rely on are failing to meet the needs of more and more people. The roof ninja, as she was called online, became a symbol of that struggle.
Right.
This reminder that even in a society that values independence and self-reliance, there are limits to what individuals can achieve on their own.
Yeah, and her nickname really took off. People were making memes comparing her to a modern-day Thoreau, seeking solitude in the wilderness of a supermarket rooftop. It was this weird mix of humor and social commentary, but it definitely captured the public's imagination.
It's interesting how humor can be a coping mechanism, right? A way to process difficult or uncomfortable realities. But I think beyond the jokes, there was a genuine sense of concern for her well-being. People were asking, how did she go unnoticed for so long? What will happen to her now? And most importantly, what does her story tell us about the state of our society?
Yeah, and this story also raised questions about safety, especially for a woman living alone in such an exposed location. Did she ever feel threatened? Did anyone know where she was? And she told police she was trying to avoid certain people, which adds this whole other layer of mystery and concern to the situation.
It really highlights the vulnerability of anyone living outside traditional housing. They often lack access to basic security and privacy, making them more susceptible to things like theft or harassment or even violence.
Right.
And this woman's situation, while extraordinary, it shines a light on the risks faced by many who are forced to seek shelter in these unconventional ways.
And it's not just about physical safety. The isolation, the lack of social connection can have a really big impact on your mental and emotional well-being. We're social creatures by nature, and prolonged isolation can lead to loneliness, depression, anxiety. It's impossible to know what this woman went through, but it's safe to say that living in a sign, even a comfortable one, comes with its own set of psychological challenges.
Exactly. And I think that's why it's crucial to remember the human element of this whole thing.
Yeah.
We're talking about a real person with her own hopes, fears, motivations. It's easy to get caught up in the sensationalism of it all, but we need to approach this with empathy and recognize that her choices, however unconventional they seem, were likely driven by a really complex set of circumstances.
Yeah, and those circumstances are often shaped by larger societal forces.
Right.
Things like economic inequality, stagnant wages, the lack of affordable housing, the stigma surrounding mental health. All these things contribute to a system that can make it incredibly difficult for some people to meet their basic needs.
This story, as bizarre as it is, it becomes this microcosm of these larger issues. It forces us to confront the cracks in our systems and acknowledge that even in a country as wealthy as the U.S., there are people struggling to survive, to find a place where they feel safe and secure.
And it challenges us to ask, what are we doing to address these issues? We're providing enough support for those who are struggling? Are we creating communities where everyone has access to affordable housing, healthcare opportunities for advancement?
These are tough questions, but they're essential if we want to create a society where everyone has a chance to thrive and not just survive.
It's also worth noting that this whole roof ninja story happened during that record-breaking heat wave in 2024.
Oh, right.
And while there's no direct link between her situation and the extreme weather, it does make you think about people living in those precarious housing situations,
Yeah.
as climate change gets worse.
Absolutely. We often think of climate change as these big disasters, but it really impacts the everyday lives of people who are already struggling. Extreme heat, flooding, all those climate-related events, they can make existing housing problems even worse,
Oh, sure.
pushing people into these unconventional and often unsafe places.
It's a reminder that climate change isn't just an environmental issue. It's a social justice issue, too.
Exactly.
The impact hits those who are already marginalized the hardest.
Yeah, and it's likely to become even bigger in the coming years. As climate change keeps getting worse, we can expect to see more people displaced from their homes looking for shelter wherever they can find it.
Yeah.
This could mean more people living in cars, tents, abandoned buildings, or even, like we saw here, supermarket signs.
So what happened after the roof ninja was discovered? Did she face any legal consequences?
Well, surprisingly, no. Both the police and Family Fair handled the situation with a lot of compassion.
Oh, that's good.
The police didn't press charges. They recognized how complex her situation was. They just asked her to leave and offered info on local resources.
Okay.
And Family Fair packed up her belongings and didn't take any legal action.
That's really good to hear. It seems like everyone involved recognized that punishment wasn't the answer.
Right.
And instead, they tried to connect her with support services to help her find a more stable situation.
And it sparked a bigger conversation about how we as a society respond to homelessness and housing insecurity. Do we criminalize it and push people further away? Or do we approach it with empathy, understanding, and recognize those systemic factors that are at play?
The roof ninja story, as strange as it is, forced people to confront these questions. It challenged those assumptions about who experiences homelessness and why. And it made us think about those invisible struggles happening all around us.
Absolutely. And it also highlighted the need for more creative and compassionate solutions. We need a wider range of options like affordable housing, mental health support, job training, all those resources that can really help people get back on their feet.
The story also sparked a lot of donations to local charities in Midland working to address homelessness and housing.
That's great.
It seems like the community was moved to action.
Yeah, sometimes it takes something shocking or unusual to wake us up and make us really see the needs around us.
So what can we learn from all this? What are the key takeaways from our deep dive into the life of the roof ninja?
Well, I think there are several. First, it reminds us that homelessness and housing insecurity can look like a lot of different things.
Right.
It's not just about people sleeping on the streets.
It's about anyone who lacks safe, stable, affordable housing.
Exactly. Second, it really highlights the importance of empathy and understanding. Everyone's situation is different. We need to approach these issues with compassion and a willingness to listen to people's stories.
For sure.
Third, we need systemic change. We can't just rely on individual acts of kindness to solve these big problems. We need to address the root causes of homelessness, poverty, inequality, the lack of affordable housing, and inadequate mental health services.
Absolutely. And finally, it reminds us about human resilience. The roof ninja found a way to survive in a system that was failing her. Her story is a powerful example of the human spirit's ability to adapt, even when faced with huge challenges.
We went from this bizarre headline to a deep exploration of social issues, personal struggles, and human resilience. The roof ninja story is a reminder that even the strangest stories can teach us a lot.
It really does. And it leaves us with a final thought for you, our listeners. What would you do if you faced a seemingly impossible challenge? Would you have the courage to create your own path, even if it meant going outside the norm? And what can we do together to create a world where everyone has the chance not just to survive, but to thrive? That's something to think about as we all navigate this complex world